Alrighty, guys. Week 2 of New Moon. Week 2 of season 2. I keep getting excited when I get a call at season 2.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so once again, we'll be starting with a segment from Jacob. We're on week 2. So, Jake, give us the short version of some of your thoughts on this week's reading. Anything new you have figured out that we didn't cover last week?
Yeah. So immediately, like the first sentence, I think, I'm like, wait, Billy's in a wheelchair? Which is just funny because that's been a character for a while, and I don't think they've mentioned that, or I just didn't see it. But I'm like, oh, all right, and it doesn't matter much. But I was just like, oh, I have to like revisualize this character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other thing, I've really liked Bella like getting emotionally better. I think I'm curious if that's like, I think I would maybe be upset if I read the first book because it would feel more like a backslide. But like for me, Bella is just a depressed character, so her getting not, it's like just an uphill thing. So I've liked that. Other things I've figured out. So I know I learned that Bella came here in the summers in the past, and so she knew Jacob. Before that, Jacob had met Mike, which implies that he was in the first book more. I've learned Mike is kind of a douche, which is a shame because I was like more pro Mike in the first part.
Just shake our heads. Nah. We're Mike haters. I don't know if there's anyone who's a Mike stan. So
I mean, so more solid on the Edward can like telepathically see Bella's life and like talk to her. She still is like, oh, I'm hallucinating, which I'm like, okay, Bella, it's fine. It is. So I think also like he seems to not be able to read the minds of other vampires because he couldn't. Who's the vampire that showed up in this one? Jasper? Was that
Laurent?
Laurent. Yeah. He couldn't, at least through the like weird mind link he has, whatever, with Bella. He didn't know what Laurent was planning because he like suddenly gets concerned, like partially through that or more concerned. And then he seems to not be able to read the minds of the werewolves because like the first time they show up, he's like, Bella, stand still, don't move. But it's like seemingly they're I don't know. I mean, we don't really know their intention, I guess, at this stage. It seems to, so I like am spoiled that I knew werewolves were like a plot point. It seems like that was maybe foreshadowed in book 1 because there's a couple lines of like, oh, are you listening to Billy's superstition or something, which implies it's like they've vaguely talked about this stuff before, but I don't know. Yeah. I mean, Charlie seems great. That's like continued. Nothing other. Oh, I guess so. Like, I've gotten more clarity on the whole. Like, I didn't know the whole blood drinking relationship, but like, if you drink blood, you have a different color eye than if you don't. Like, you only have red eyes.
Yeah.
And then also like the more talking about killing vampires. Like, I guess Edward killed James, which is interesting just in the context of in the first group of books they talked about Edward thinking how hard it would be to kill himself. So seemingly it's like only a vampire can kill a vampire, although maybe werewolves can because they were scared of those. But
we did make a note last week about the fact you mentioned something about James, and we're like, oh, he doesn't realize James is dead.
Yeah.
They didn't make that clear till this
I was like, is James gonna show up? And that's the main plot of book. Yes, that's been me. I continue to suspect there's something going on with Bella. They're foreshadowing just because like the dream stuff is very weird. But seemingly it's not like
dreams in these books.
Yeah, it seems to not be like prophetic because there's weird stuff like Jacob turning into Edward, which like emotionally makes sense, but doesn't make it all sense. I mean, unless there's more complicated lore.
Yeah.
There was also a line where Jacob said, Bella, you're the palest person I know. except for one other person where I'm like, all right, if that's maybe a thing, but I don't know. So
yeah,
I mean, that's kind of what I'm at. I mean, obviously, like interested in the werewolf stuff. That all seems new, I would assume, but like Jacob mentioning a lot of like, this shouldn't be happening, and I the werewolf stuff feels like so obvious to me, where it's like, where Bella's like, I've figured it all out. They're in a cult, and I'm like, okay, well, but I'm like, it's the standard like dramatic irony thing of I think you're supposed to figure it out before Bella, but
yeah,
I feel like if you're aware at all that there's werewolves in the book, really takes out the surprise. Because I was aware when I read it the first time that there was werewolves. I don't know if Callie was or not, but
I was not, because the movies hadn't come out yet when I read New Moon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the movie hadn't even come out for the werewolves. It was just I had heard it talked about so much, and people are always like, "Oh yeah, werewolves versus vampires," and I'm like, "Okay, so clearly there's werewolves,"
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. I don't know that I don't like that we don't respond to anything you say. I guess it works for spoilers, but I keep wanting to like interject things.
Sorry.
And there's some things that I'm like, well, this isn't set and it's on my list to chat about with Amy. So I'm like, we got to figure out like if we include specifically around Bella hearing Edward's voice in her head. Like I have a lot of things to discuss, but I don't know if we should just keep that to later.
I think we should keep it till later.
Yeah, because I don't know like what, if anything, has been established in book one of like if they have like a weird connection or something. Like
yeah.
I don't know.
Anyways, well, you don't know, but we're gonna talk about it more later for all the
listeners. About it.
I did take notes about things we should talk about after we got with Jacob. But I did have a question for you. Did you have any thoughts about? I don't remember how much was said about Bella's scar, but I know it was mentioned.
Yeah. So that, I mean, it was mentioned. I took note of it. It's like ice cold or something. I don't know. It was like mentioned again. I don't know if it like means any. So like, because I know they've said she lost like nearly all of her blood in the what I assume is the big event in book one.
I think they say in this section how she gets it.
I don't think they say exactly how. They reference it and like hint at it very much, but don't outright say it.
Oh, I thought it was outright.
No, I didn't. But that's why I made a note of it. But
let's look. Just kidding. I don't want to flip through all this.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
I didn't realize like vampires have like granite skin is like an interesting not like thing. So I wonder if it's like that. It's like vampire skin or something. But
yeah, that my question for this week, Jake, is I'm curious to hear what you think is like what's up with vampires, what's the vampire lore compared to other fantasy vampires from what you've read so far. Because this is a distinct point in Twilight. I think you already know, obviously the vampires are different. There's a lot of cliches about them.
I mean, famously, they glitter, and
hence the title of the podcast.
So that they don't like die in the sun. It seems like generally less curse-y, but like, I mean, that was the whole thing in the first one. Like, do we have souls anymore? So there's still a bit of that. It seems like the Cullens, I was thinking they like drank animal blood because that's like the normal like good vampires do, but it seems like they just don't drink blood in general, which makes it seem like it's like not a requirement, which is different from like normal vampire things.
I'm curious why you say you don't think that they do at all, just because we haven't seen anything, or
I mean that's true, I guess. So just more the way she talked about Laurent, however you say his name.
Laurent, like I believe it is.
Laurent? Oh.
I think it's French.
The Francais. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know for sure either way, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm more feeling just vibe wise that it seems like it's just like a no blood situation. It seems.
We also haven't seen a lot of the Cullens in this book.
There's been not a lot of vampire action.
Yeah. Do you think that?
So
changed? Do you have thoughts about what will happen?
So I went back to the prelude, and so it does open with her hanging out with, I forget her name, Edward's sister, who's
Alice.
Bella's friend, Alice. Yeah, and it does say that Bella runs into the sunlight because Alice can't. So I know like Bella isn't immediately turning into a vampire if that's being foreshadowed, which I'm not sure it necessarily is, but so I know they're coming back. Also now with the whole like Victoria has like a revenge plot against Bella, seems like a reason to like, hey Cullens, you've kind of put her in a lot of danger by just cold turkey leaving. So I feel like that's like an obvious reason for them to show back up. Also, I mean, Jacob mentioned like the reason. I mean, he was all vague, but like the reason he's becoming a werewolf is because of the Cullens indirectly or something like that. So I assume there's some, that's all going to tie back in as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to pause the vampire lore because I did find the section which says, so Bella's saying, do you honestly expect me to remember where all my scars come from? I waited for the memory to hit to open the gaping hole, but as it so often did, Jacob's presence kept me whole. It's cold, he murmured, pressing lightly against the place where James had cut me with his teeth.
With his teeth. I think I just mentioned that. Because I think I knew it happened from James vaguely, but didn't know he bit her. Interesting. So normally, I mean, in other vampire stories, it's like they have to drink your blood and you have to drink their blood and then you become a vampire. So I wonder
I'll be honest, I didn't even know that.
I mean, it's not in everything, but
yeah, I did know that from what? Maybe the Shadowhunter books.
Yeah, I haven't like read any of the vampire stuff or really.
As a side note,
vampire content.
I found it really
bit of what we do in the shadows, but I haven't watched much.
Ugh,
I should watch it. I enjoy it.
It's so good. Jackie Daytona. The best episode.
I found it really interesting reading this, like having obviously read stuff inspired by this. Like I read Discovery of Witches, which very much feels like just the author read this and was like, here's the things I don't like about Twilight. I'm going to write my own book, like it's very like the vampire in that literally is like, I'm going to break up with you. And she's like, no, you're not. I'm involved in this. And then like, they don't break up, which feels like she was annoyed at this plot point in New Moon. Like, so.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because Twilight obviously is like heavily inspired by a lot of vampire novels, but it really gave a resurgence to the paranormal romance genre, if not kind of outright starting it, at least in like the YA category. Yeah, so it's an interesting mix of it is heavily inspired by other books, like Stephenie Meyers did not make up vampires or werewolves, but also like she also has inspired a lot of other authors. So it's this weird like midpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any other things you're noticing specifically like vampire lore in the Twilight world?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess werewolf lore I'm kind of getting more exposure to. I'm intrigued that that's not like the normal like full moon curse kind of thing. It's some like, I don't know. I'm curious what we're gonna get with that. But there's not. It's interesting the like emphasis of like he's always really hot and Edward is very cold. Like, that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Specifically in this section, it talks about Jacob's hand being super rough and hot. And we got so many descriptions in book 1 of Edward being super cold and like smooth, like granite, like he's like stone. Is the
I didn't even notice that they described his hands as rough. That was a good note to have. Or I just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah. Either way. Yeah, anything else, Jake? So we talked about the sun. We talked about the turning into vampires, werewolves, full moon, maybe something else while I was looking up the section about the scar.
So yeah. I think
I'm trying to think of other vampire cliches.
Yeah, I mean, so there's normally like a vampire seduction thing is like a common thing, which I don't know how much that's here or not, because like seemingly Bella was like unrealistically into Edward, but like she's also like, I don't know what her relationship is with Jacob. She's like really into him, but she's like, nah, but I'm not romantically interested in him. I just want to spend every waking hour with him and, you know, talk about his trauma. Like, so I think it's just supposed to be her. I'm also interested if there's some like werewolf intuition, because there's been a couple times where it's like, how did Jacob know that? I never told him that. He just kind of figured that out. So that's a thing maybe, but shrug.
Yeah.
Vampire weird telepathy thing Edward has. I don't think Laurent did anything like crazy weird. He just kind of came at her and then wolves showed up. But
yeah, do we know Laurent's special power?
I don't know at this current point, and I can't recall what it is or if we ever learn that, but we might. I'm not sure.
All right. Please write us, Dallas. Let us know. Dallas is the show fact checker.
That's the kind of thing that normally I'd look up right away, but I'm like, I want to not remember other details.
Yeah, don't. Yeah. Also, I'm like, you might come across other spoilers. Yes, exactly. Dallas, just tell us if we know already. That's all we want to know. Well, Jake, any other thoughts you want to add about impressions, specifically around what you think is happening or interesting, like plot line pieces beyond like what we know from the book, right? Because obviously I'm sure you have plenty of thoughts that you could say based on having read now 40% of New Moon, but more so I'm like, our interest, no offense with having you on the show, is to be like, what are the things that you like are noticing because you haven't read Twilight, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just looking through my notes here.
Yeah, or maybe if it's helpful, if it's not, ignore it, but anything you like wish you knew at this point. Like you're like, man, I wish this thing was cleared up.
I kind of wish I understood more of like Charlie's situation. Like it seems like they like, so I know seemingly because they've mentioned like, oh, Summer's at Charlie's for the last, you know, in the past. So like seemingly Bella's parents have been separated for a while. But like I don't know why Bella's here now or like starting last year or whenever. Like I don't really understand the like why are they in Ford? Forks. Like
the utensil.
I see. So interested about that. I'd say, I mean, generally, like just interested in like how her relationship with Edward started, just because of the whole like everyone seems, it's like very secretive seemingly, and the like everyone who knows things is very like hush hush about it. And so I'm curious, like just with the kind of ongoing mystery where like I'm like, is something weird with Bella, which seemingly because they couldn't read her minds there is. So I'm curious like what triggered the initial interest from people about that, because
do you feel like you know where they met?
I mean, so okay. So that's they've really emphasized this meadow being a big deal. I have no idea why. I assume it was like some big scene because they're all like, oh, it's I'll certainly connect with Edward if I go to the meadow. I imagine that was important, but she doesn't hike, so I don't know why she was in the meadow without Edward. So that's
or doesn't know
weird.
how to get there.
Yeah, she doesn't know. So I don't know. Maybe that was more like a big romantic situation or something. Yeah.
I feel like you're alluding to something, Callie, that we already talked about maybe I shouldn't say anything. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm legitimately curious if Jacob knows where they met or not. I'm not trying to allude to anything beyond that.
I don't know if I do. I mean, so because they've mentioned the like group of guys at a pier or something like that. I think we talked about that last episode where I'm like, this seems like something going on. Where just when she was like, okay, all right, Callie.
I think he's talking about.
No, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
The people in Port Angeles, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I kind of guessed that it's something to do with that.
Yeah. That's a fair guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because also it seems like the Cullens are kind of like not in town, but
yeah, their house is like out in the woods. They talk about. Okay.
Yeah. Although it could be like because they keep talking about like, oh, Bella keeps hospitalizing herself because she's clumsy, and like with the dad being a surgeon, maybe it was some. I was just in the emergency room so often. I got to know the surgeon's family, and
yeah,
fell in love with this.
She go to the hospital at least 2 times in this, and they were really nonchalant about the second time. I'm like, wait, she goes to the hospital again?
Yeah.
Cash.
Getting in motorcycle accidents, you know.
Cash. Mm-hmm. All right, Jake. Well, thanks for coming on, sharing your thoughts. I imagine that every week you'll have kind of like less to share because the bulk of what you are going to know is from the beginning. But I'm curious, like next week and the week after, since we're already like halfway through, which is crazy comparatively to the Twilight Midnight Sun reading we did. But yeah, I'm curious, like any questions that'll get answered for you. And so I feel like that's kind of what the segment will be moving forward, or like what are the questions you had in these first 2 sections that were answered in the reading from here on out. And then week 4, so our final week of the new moon read, I'm curious, we'll have you maybe do like a book review based on what you know or something like that. You know, you prep a little Goodreads review for us.
I would imagine when the vampires become plot relevant again, there'll be more like
there might be more questions then, or more
because it seems like most of the werewolf stuff we're being introduced to for the first time, and like there hasn't really been much to the like we've had no interactions with the Cullens except for kind of Edward, you know, so like I don't know. I'm interested when we jump back into that if the Cullens are going to be like, oh, we were out doing this thing, and be like, what? So
yeah, reading New Moon now, I kind of wish we had waited and had you do the blind read in Eclipse, because I feel like that would have been like max mystery, because
max confusion.
Yeah, because we get all the vampire context in book 1, and New Moon is building up all the werewolf lore, and so then Eclipse you would have come in knowing like neither, but oh well.
It would have been fun because Callie and I don't remember what happens in Eclipse.
True. We do not at all.
I remember some of it, but not
0. I remember 0% of what happens in Eclipse.
Yeah.
I remember again in Breaking Dawn, but that's about it.
I do think, though, I think I mentioned this already, but I think I would be a lot more annoyed had I read Twilight of like Bella's emotional arc, because I'm feeling very like when she's like, oh, and then I interacted with, you know, the friends, and I'm like leaving zombie mode. I'm like, yeah, Bella. Whereas I feel like if I had a full book and then she like really shut down, I'd be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I was get back to Bella in this section, so I think
like I'm usually very annoyed with like character backsliding perceptually. So I think I'm much more pro Bella than I would be otherwise.
Yeah. But, that's interesting. I honestly guessed you were going to be more annoyed with Bella because your only intro to her was going to be her in this dark place. But it makes sense what you're saying, that like you're watching her climb out, which is more rewarding.
I think it's just because she like shut down in like chapter 2, and so it's just been like uphill from there.
Yeah.
Which I've liked. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on today, Jake.
Yeah, thanks for having me
next week. I mean, I'll also see you a lot of times before then.
But I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye. Bye. Okay.
Gotta hold back there, so.
I know. I did have to hold back.
Were you trying to get at the fact that whether or not he knew that they went to high school?
Yeah.
We talked about last week. I don't know if we specifically said Edward or not, but it was someone, because he was like, I assumed that Jasper probably didn't go to high school because of the whole.
Yeah.
So I think with their graduation. So we talked about it. So.
Okay.
I don't know if it specifically said Edward or not, so that's why I didn't say anything. But
okay. Yeah. Oh man. Okay, so you were annoyed this week. I finally was not annoyed. Like, I was less annoyed this week.
I was less annoyed, but I was more annoyed with her talking about how she had these boundaries with Jacob. And I'm like, you never clearly stated those boundaries at all. And you clearly know he's into you and you aren't saying anything. But you keep saying stuff to Mike about your boundaries, but not to Jacob, which seems like Jacob needs them more than Mike does. So
yeah.
I was annoyed with that whole thing, but I also got annoyed with Jacob a couple moments. So
yeah, she was pretty shitty to Jacob, to be honest. I was glad she like finally, obviously we'll get into it, but at the movie theater, she is like over, like this is not happening. But then still like lets it play out. That's when I got annoyed with
Jacob, because he was all like, "Oh, well, it could," kind of thing. We'll get into it.
Yeah. Ugh. Okay. Well, should we jump into chapter 7 is our first chapter we read today, right? Or chapter 6? Great. Let's jump into chapter 6.
Trying to skip pages already, but
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I was just looking at my notes to see. I feel like there was something that I made note of that I wanted to talk about that Jacob talked about, but maybe there wasn't. Maybe we covered it. Oh, about him thinking that Edward can telepathically see Bella's life.
Oh, yeah. No, all his thoughts around that. I'm like, I have comments for us to discuss what you think and what you think is happening. But when he's like, Jake, like rolling his eyes, like metaphorically, you know, like clearly being exasperated that, like Bella thinks that she's hallucinating all this. And I'm like, as far as we know, she is hallucinating it, right? Like,
I don't know. What do you remember about that? Do you
No, see, I don't remember, but I don't think she's hallucinating.
Okay. Well, then I'm not going to say anything. Okay.
Great.
I could have. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. But also I'm like, from before, like we have discussed, this is not a Reese situation. Like he cannot speak into her mind previously. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting how he was like, oh, well, he can't read like vampires and werewolves' minds, it seems like, because he couldn't, and it's like, he just doesn't get the proximity thing is important, but
yeah, totally.
Checks out again. But he also is like thinking maybe he's there in some way, because if he's speaking to Bella, I guess, but
right.
Anyway, all right.
Yeah. What a time. What a time. Will I get this answer in this book? Or is it?
I don't know. I don't know if I honestly might be forgetting something about it too, so I'm not sure.
Okay. So, well, we got another 2 weeks, and then we'll know. We'll know if we know. It is going to be weird when Edward then like comes back in. Like I feel like Jake is not going to be into it or get it.
Yeah,
which is fine.
He's not going to be Team Edward. I don't know if he'll be Team Jacob, but he's not going to be Team Edward probably.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. I think it would be hard to be Team Edward if you had only read this book, you know?
For sure.
Like, you aren't Team Edward and you read the last book.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I also have an update about our Jacob, Team Edward theory about everyone who saw the movies first as Team Jacob and read the books, and our theory does not hold up. I
I also had that happen today at the coffee shop. I was
Yeah.
talking to the barista about it.
And was she Team Edward or Team Jacob?
It was Team Jacob.
As is my friend Caitlin, and she read the books before she saw them.
Oh, Caitlin and Maggie. All right. All right.
But then Caitlin made a point of saying how much she's into golden retriever type guys, and look at the guy that she's with now, and I'm like, that checks
Yeah.
out.
That checks with Zach. What's funny is that I'm not into that, but that
I
like
had that
Will
thought.
is he's a golden retriever husband
Yeah.
for sure. He's the sweetest. Which actually I'm like, no, that is what I want because
Yeah.
he's emotionally healthy.
I feel like you can want different things in your real
Yeah.
life, what you want for a character in a book, you know? And like you
Totally.
said, like depending on the writing, like you could root for anybody, you know? Like I agree.
Yeah. I should say, yeah.
Not anybody, but
Right. Yeah. And who knows? I have not dated a lot of morally gray, ancient, very rich men in my real life.
you make it sound like there's at least one though.
Not very many. Unconfirmed. Yeah, so can't speak to that, but definitely very satisfied with my very sweet acts of service husband. Which if you guys follow Oxford Lemon on Instagram, she makes so many comments waiting for her acts of service boyfriend to come do things for her, and it cracks me up. And then I feel guilty because I'm like, my acts of service husband does do a million things for me every day. And should I feel bad about that? He's so nice.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, shout out to Will being the angel of the world. Will Friesen. Anyways, I don't like to read about those characters. I want the morally gray baddie, and you're like, does this make sense? Anyways, you know. All right. Well, now that we've covered some of our thoughts about what Jake said, should we jump into chapter 6?
Yeah, chapter 6. What happens in chapter 6? We meet a bunch of characters that, well, have we met? Did we meet them at the beach? Maybe we did, or they were alluded to. I have Quill, Embry, and Seth. I don't know if we've met all of them or not.
I think Quill and Embry, we are both just meeting at the intro to chapter 6 because they introduce themselves to Bella.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
We didn't meet Seth, did we? I got Seth and Sam confused for a second there. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we get more interaction with characters at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it starts off with Bella and Jacob fixing up the bikes, and Quill and Embry come in and are like teasing Jacob, which I just think is such a cute, like 15, 16-year-old boy moment. Like, yeah, it's just sweet.
Yeah, I definitely made a note about them clearly being teenage boys here, because there's also some like nerdy joke that they giggle at, or that they laugh at, and I'm like, yep, they're definitely teenage boys. So
yeah, and I think that's some of my favorite writing in these books is Stephenie Meyer's like writing of relationships in like family and friend dynamics. I think is really realistic, specifically with her other characters. I don't always know that it is with Bella, but like, you know, like the Cullens interactions with each other feel so real. This scene, you know, with Jacob among like his peers feels really real. Where like sometimes like Bella and interactions with people at school, I don't get as much of that, but also some of that's just Bella as a character is like just different, maybe is part of it.
I feel like she's not as close with those people and stuff, but I think it could be just Bella as a character. But I had notes here about her and Jacob's relationship, and why I'm Team Jacob is because she talks about like the giggling and that she's just laughing without even like thinking about it or whatever. And I'm like, that's why I like their relationship, because it's just effortless, you know, like, and he just inherently gets her, which Jake commented about whether um what did he say about how I took some note on it. About maybe that he has some type of werewolf intuition about knowing stuff about Bella that she hasn't mentioned. And is that what that's supposed to be? Or is it just that he gets her like on a human level? I genuinely don't know. I think it could be either.
Yeah, I think that it's just he gets her and he's such a warm person because as far as I remember, we don't see that from like other werewolves
Yeah.
interpreting Bella really well. It's that Jacob is just such a good friend for her.
Yeah.
I do agree. In this section, I wrote at one point in one of the chapters, like I get why people are so team Jacob. And I think like if this was like my friend I was talking to, I would probably push her to like pursue Jacob, not Edward. But if I was Bella, I would be into Edward. Like I get her like obsessive.
I just
Yeah.
oh
Yeah,
no.
100%.
Man.
It's like the part of me that just is so like intense and I just am like I 100% get it and I stand by like I'm team Edward, but I really obviously you guys know I hated the ending of the book. I hated the beginning of this. Like I was dreading reading New Moon. And now I'm like better with it. But yeah.
I find that interesting because we were talking about like how like you can want different things for a character in a book versus in your real life. And I thought it was going to be that kind of situation for you where you were team Edward for the books, but you would go after Edward in this situation. I'm a little surprised by that, but
yeah, I think if I had the experience that Bella did and that like intensity of like falling for someone, I don't think I could like
yeah.
move
I just
on.
don't think I would ever fall for Edward in the first place, I think is where
Yeah.
I have trouble with it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm just too intense of a romantic and like not even I don't even know that it's like a loyalty thing because I actually think you're a much more like this sounds bad. I always feel like I'm dissing myself in this podcast, but I feel like you're a much more loyal person than I am. Like
I think you are a loyal person. I think I am just a very intensely loyal person.
yeah, or you have
times. So
yeah, you have like a lot more like long-term like friends than I do. But I think like I think I have a lot more like people that are like tier 2 friends that it's pretty easy for me to like let go of. But like my inner circle is like very small and I'm like real intense about it. But it's like a small list who's there.
yeah.
So yeah. Anyways. Interesting. But yeah, no, I definitely think I like very much. I think it's why it's so painful for me to like read this section and why I hate it so much is because I do like I can see myself in Bella's emotional state. And I know like going through a breakup that I didn't see coming, that I didn't really feel like I had a choice in where I was so invested in. Like I was kind of like this, you know, like so I think that's where I'm like, no, I get it. I think I would be Team Edward for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Because I also went through, I never really thought about my breakup as being that kind of way, but like the way that you just described it, I'm like, that kind of describes the breakup I went through. But you did never get back together with the person.
Right.
So
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that explains it.
Yeah, I was curious because I was thinking about like both of these breakups and like I had like my breakup first, so you guys know the lore of us, and I feel like it was like
real personal this week.
Real personal. But then it was like such a good moment in our friendship because like I understood that you were reacting really strongly in your breakup, even though they were very like different situations. And like, I think we even felt differently about the breakups, but we both like reacted intensely. And I think it was like a like cute best friend moment for us. Again, because we have talked about last season, like we've never been the best friends who are like, let's dish about the boys we're into or the people we're into. Like it's just not.
Yeah.
That's not been us. And so it was like the one moment we have.
Yeah. It really was very pushy. I remember when I came in to visit you at work and it was busy and Isaac was like, why were you talking to Amy for so long? And you're like, I had to talk to her.
Yeah.
Got all defensive.
Isaac, I hope you're listening to this podcast.
That seems likely.
Can you imagine?
So he's missing out.
Man. Yeah, gotta love old coworkers from when we all worked at Tom's. What a time. Anyways,
heavy in the alley lore this week.
Yeah, we are. Okay, so to jump back in and retie it all together, I get where people are Team Jacob. Like he's so sweet. The relationship is really easy, and it's the classic, like, I think the advice that is good is you should date your best friend, you know, like that's like the person you should end up with. So it makes sense. It makes sense why that's how people feel. Okay, I want to talk about her nightmares. I don't know if you have anything you want to jump in with before this, but yeah, I want to talk about specifically in chapter 6, the nightmares, the lack of nightmares that Bella has.
Sure. I'm trying to think if these happened before or not. I had 2 silly comments prior to the nightmares. One was about talking about how expensive it is to fix up the bikes and that it could cost $100.
I have that. Okay, that note is after the nightmares.
It is after. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
let's talk about the nightmares.
Yeah. Okay, but I also have a comment on that because that's insane. I spent more on groceries this week than they spent on these motorcycles.
I literally looked up like what that money was worth when this book came out, and it's like $150 today. I'm like, that's nothing for 2 bikes. Like that's for 1 bike. That's not a lot. Ridiculous. I was expecting over $1,000.
Same. I thought it was going to be $1,000.
Yeah.
Anyway, ridiculous. Yeah. Nightmare. Yeah. Also to be like, that took a big dent out of her college fund. You clearly are not saving enough for college if $150 is taking a dent.
Yeah. I do think college was significantly cheaper then, but not that.
I don't know. But. Yeah. I don't know about that much. Anyways. Yeah. Okay. So the no nightmares. We get the idea. Obviously, the nightmares and like dreams are a predominant part of this whole book, really. But we get the idea in this section. It's the first night that she's not having nightmares. Previously, she's having them like every night. She's having like real PTSD symptoms, which I think I talk about later. Yeah, I do. I talk about later when the nightmares like start again. But I am curious. I'm curious because we're definitely, I think, led to believe that this is like she's just happy with Jacob, right? I think Stephenie Meyer isn't trying to say anything bigger, but I want to make it bigger, obviously, because that's the point of this podcast. And I'm curious, like, I think this is a werewolf thing. I want to believe that. I want to believe that on top of Jacob being a good friend, like the supernatural, like it seems over the top that she's like kind of low-key addicted to him. Like it's the first thing making her feel better in this like gaping hole that Edward has left. And I want to say it's like some antidote that being around the werewolves have. Yeah, I don't know. I'm choosing to believe it.
As you said that, like, I genuinely have no idea if that's true or not, but as you said that, I'm like, that sounds like familiar. Like, I think that might be true, but I really don't know. And it also made me think of, I don't think it happens in the books, but it does in the movies where Jacob gives her a dream catcher. So yeah. I wonder if that
right
this. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's how I feel. And even if it's not like the intention, I want to believe that because it's more interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah,
I kind of feel like that's the case, but I don't know if that's true or not. It should be if it's not.
Yeah, it should be. It should be. Yeah, okay, then my next comment is the $100 bike thing, which is insane to me, but we basically already talked about it. So, yeah.
I had another comment just after that, which was also a silly comment about her being 5'4". That means that Jacob is a full foot taller than her. Which is crazy because he's 6'4", as we talked about last week. So then I had to look up the actor rates, of course. And it makes more sense as to why they were thinking about recasting Taylor Lautner, because he's only 5'9", which surprised me.
How tall is Kristen Stewart?
He's 5'5". And then Robert Pattinson is 6'1". So I'm like, I get why they would talk about recasting him, but also I would have been so pissed if they recasted him. And I think he does a good job as Jacob.
Yeah, he does a good job, and he's a beautiful human. So we're all thankful. We're all thankful. But yeah. Okay, a heartbreaking line from chapter 6 that I like. I don't know. I just actually was thinking kind of a lot about, like, it's been sitting with me, is when she talks about that she's so relieved to be with Jacob because he's not looking at the corner, like looking at the corner of his eye, waiting for her to like go crazy or lose it. And I just think, like, I don't know. I think it just hit me so much because, like, isn't that what people need when you're in a crisis and you're like, you get to this point where you're just like over being judged by the crisis, and to have somebody new come in who just like accepts you and like doesn't make it all about that. I don't know. I just think that's I think that's like kind of powerful and like a big lesson from Twilight, from New Moon.
Who knew?
Who knew? Yeah. Okay, and then she ripped out the stereo in her truck.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It makes 1,000,000% sense, but to me it's sadder because it's about Emmett. That's like from him.
I know. That is sad.
Anyways, that got me.
Do anything? Well, I guess he's also gone, but
yeah, but still, it's sad. It's sad. And it also seems weird to me that like Edward didn't take it out, but maybe because it was like from Emmett. But still, you know, like that he would take the CD but not remove the truck stereo. Like, I don't know, whatever. Yeah. Okay, and then my next comment goes back to then the nightmares, because then the nightmares start again the next day. And mostly I want to talk about, these are like real PTSD symptoms that she's having, like legitimately. And I think what's important to note about that is, you know, Edward's whole reason for leaving is that he's putting her at so much harm. But the fact is, he's literally caused more like psychological and emotional damage than what James did. Like, she did not have PTSD from the attack with James. She was not dwelling on it. She wasn't fixated on it as like in the same way she is. And so just like, I think that's like really important to note that actually he's doing more damage than James did.
I also just had the thought, I wonder how much his actions would change or not change. Like, I'm sure the whole beginning would be different, but if he could read her mind, because, you know, he's so used to being able to read everybody's minds. But in this situation, I don't think he realizes how much damage he is doing. Like,
no, I don't think so. I do think he'd be like stubborn about it for a while because he knows that it's going to upset her, right? From what we know from Alice's visions. But yeah, I do think, like, at least I want to believe that if Edward knew the contrast and had been able to read her minds through everything that they went through the last year and then read her mind now, that he would know how much more dramatically she's hurting, and he would have come back.
Yeah. You remember at all, I feel like we've talked about this already, but so if we have, tell me that. But you remember at all how we get introduced back into the Cullens brought back to the, like, do you remember that at all? Or
so I remember the miscommunication that happens, for lack of a better word, the misinterpretation maybe of one of Alice's visions.
Okay.
which I can say or we cannot for spoilers.
But whatever. We don't
yeah.
have to, but if you want to, whatever.
Yeah. Does that make sense though? Like, do you know what does that give you an idea of what I'm talking about?
I think so.
Okay, I'll just
say it and I can cut it out if we want, or we can keep.
I mean, we'll just say like spoilers if you don't want going into New Moon.
Forward 10 seconds or 15 seconds.
Yeah. Okay, so I remember that Alice sees a vision of her going cliff diving and thinks she's going to commit suicide. Also, trigger warning. Sorry, everybody. I just said that word. Whatever. Not whatever. It's serious, but also what? It's so hard to be on the internet these days. Okay.
I mean, we're already talking about PTSD. We're talking about a lot of stuff, but
yeah. I just feel like that's a more triggering word than the word PTSD, you know. Anyways, so that's what I remember. And then that someone comes back and then somebody else must come back to tell her, or Edward calls at some point. Anyway, something happens and she finds out that Edward is also going to commit suicide. And that's and he goes to the Volturi and then she goes to Italy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you remember a lot of it. Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. This is a safe part to come back in. If you've been skipping ahead. Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna say I do like during, it's not just this chapter, but some other chapters too, them talking about what age they actually think they are, and I'm like, that's something I so would do. I love that.
Yeah, I do think it's a really funny dynamic.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah. Okay, which one of us is older then by these rules?
Ooh. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like this is something we could debate a lot. That's my point. I could see myself doing this. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it depends. I think we could like debate back and forth a lot too, but I think your spirit is probably older than mine. Maybe because you're a more stable person than me.
I was going to originally say that, but then they also talk about like different life skills, and I feel like you have a lot of random life skills that I do not. So
I've done a million different jobs and obsessively try things.
Yeah. So that's I could see it going to either of us. So
yeah.
I guess we're the same age, like we are in real life.
Wow. Amy is 6 months older. Almost to the day, like 6 months and something.
I think it's like 5 months and like 26 days or something like that. Because I'm the 8th and you're the 12th. And I'm older, so.
Yeah.
So whatever. It would be 6 months and 4 days.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I was like, isn't it the reverse of that? But then I was like, whatever, I don't want to do the math. And then we talked about it anyways. Okay. Guys, my DoorDash was delivered. Sitting outside. Great news.
How exciting.
Okay. Moving forward. Yeah. My final comment for chapter 6 is just that it's really sad how her friends act. And I don't know if it's sad because her friends, like it's sad that they've let it, just like they're glossing over it, or if it's sad because Bella clearly has just been so checked out that everyone's given up on her. Like it's kind of like equal parts, you know?
Yeah, I know. I feel like it's shitty that they're like acting that way when it's like she's clearly been in a depression. And I mean, we also don't see a lot that happens, so maybe they have tried to make an effort and nothing happens. But yeah, I was also bothered. It was like the one time that I have been like, what the fuck, Bella, was her comments about Lauren's haircut were so rude. And I'm just like, what is the point of this? I don't even know. Like, and she's so judgmental. Like,
yeah, I did think this when I was reading this, I was like, oh, Stephenie, you let your Mormonism show a little bit. Like those like conservative, like typical gender roles and like how women should look.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which again, I think like if this was published like low key, maybe it would have been canceled. Like
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
like that's not cool to like talk about. Like it's not like okay at all. And again, this came out in like 2007 or whatever, and it sucks that that maybe was more okay then. But yeah, it's like so needless. It doesn't add anything in. I also
I did all of a sudden realize like, sorry, what'd you say?
I didn't even remember this character.
Yeah, she's not in the movie, so I also forgot about her. But
Yeah.
I also like just made the connection that maybe it's supposed to be like a parallel because Jacob cuts his hair, but it doesn't seem like there's any point to it, you know? Like,
No, I don't think so.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The text was copyrighted in 2006 for
Yeah.
reference of when it was published.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Not cool. Not cool. Lots of the triggers in this episode we're talking about, man.
Yeah. I feel like the beginning of this book is like heavy, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it is. That one was just dumb because it's needless. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
move the plot. It's not to like add emotional depth or help you understand anything or like experience the pain. It's just why? Why?
like maybe it's supposed to show that like Bella doesn't get along with everybody because this is like the one character she really doesn't seem to get along with, but I also don't know what purpose that serves. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Feels needless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, chapter 7.
Yeah.
Great. So it starts off, my first comment is just, it's messed up. She is leading Jacob on so freaking much in this section, and it is messed up. Yeah.
Yep.
Not into that. Not into it. Not cool. Yeah.
I'm glad that you feel this way because I could see someone being like, oh, well, she has these boundaries and clearly isn't into him. And like, I do think he should pick up on the hints that he's not into her, but like, I also think she's being unfair because she's acting like she has these boundaries that she hasn't expressed at all. So,
yeah. No. I'm 1,000,000% an overt communication person. Like, I'm like, you need to always assume people don't know what you're thinking unless you have actually said it to them.
Yeah.
And then if you've actually said it, then it's on them. Yeah. Like, which is where I'm like, the shift happens for me later because she does verbally say it to Jacob. And he's even like, well, then it's on me, which I'm like, yeah, it is. Like, once it's been overtly communicated, if you choose not to believe that person, that's on you. But until it's been overtly communicated, it's on you. It's your responsibility. So, yeah, no. So I think this is messed up in this section because we don't have that yet. And I honestly would be pretty mad at Bella if she didn't do that. Like, I'm really glad we get that section because it would feel really out of character for her to so overtly be using Jacob, you know?
That's why I got so annoyed with her because like she was talking to Mike and like was clarifying that they weren't going on a date. And I'm like, you're being so careful about making that clear to him, but not to Jacob. Like, come on. But then she does. That's good.
Yeah.
Also at the beginning of this chapter, Bella goes to the Cullens' house before we get into that, which I did not remember because it's not in the movies. But I'm curious, we kind of talked about it a little bit, if you have thoughts around, well, I guess we learn later about what triggers Edward showing up or not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do. I do think that's like spooky. And I thought what she says in this, where she can't bear to look in the windows because she doesn't know if it's more painful to see all the furniture gone or to see it all there and like they fled. I'm like, same. I don't know what's worse. Like,
that specific line really hit me because once again, we're going to get personal on this week's podcast because when our grandma passed away, mine, Callie shared grandma, I remember like, I typically, when someone dies, like don't cry immediately and there's something that happens that makes me like go crazy. And with grandma, it was when the rocking chairs weren't in her house. I was just like, Because I'm like, they were always there, and I just like lost it, and I just that memory like sticks with me, even though that was like what 15 years ago, like
Yeah.
and
Our,
that
yeah.
just like hit me when she talked about the furniture being there. I'm like, oh, poor Bella.
Yeah, that's rough. Poor Amy. That makes sense. Oh, our grandma had like probably 7 rocking chairs in her living room. It's like a very distinct childhood memory that I associate with her.
Yeah, same, which is why I got so upset when they weren't there. So
yeah. Okay, well, whatever. Never mind. I have questions, but it's not relevant for the podcast.
About who took the rocking chairs?
What? Who has
I don't know. I also had that thought when I was reading this. I'm like, I don't know what happened to those. But
yeah.
someone did something with them. So
okay, well, cool. I do. Okay, Jacob brought this up earlier, but I think if Jake, my brother, and I think it is like reading this section, hearing about Sam's gang. It is so obvious they're werewolves, but I wish I remembered when I picked up on the fact that they were werewolves when I read it, you know? Because I was
curious. Did you remember the whole time that Sam was a werewolf? Because I remembered that for sure. And like, I remembered him being like the leader or whatever. And I didn't say anything last week when we talked about it because I wasn't sure if he remembered that or not. Because I was like, oh, this werewolf that everyone keeps seeing is Sam. I like knew that because I knew that one specifically.
I knew he was a werewolf when he was the one who found Bella. I wasn't like overtly that. So I knew he was a werewolf. I didn't know he was like the black werewolf that people are seeing. Yeah. I also did not know he was the leader. I have a comment. It's in this section. So we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it in a second. But yeah. So I do think like if you know, then it's really obvious. But I am curious. I wish I could remember if I knew they were werewolves. Because I think everyone knows it's like a werewolf vampire thing. So I don't think anyone is gonna read Twilight for the first time and like not know they're werewolves.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It probably depends like when you read them because like maybe you didn't know because if you were already or no, I'm thinking of something else. Sorry. I was confusing that you read other. I was going to say you read other Stephenie Meyer books, but no, you read other Suzanne Collins books before you read the Hunger Games. But I feel like I don't know. I definitely knew, even though I hadn't actually seen anything or read anything about the werewolves, because people just talked about it. Like when they talk about the book, they're like, "Oh yeah, werewolves and vampires," and then you read the first book, and you're like, where are these werewolves?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't know, because Twilight was definitely huge. Like I was reading it in its hype, but before the movies were out.
Yeah.
Where, it is a claim to fame I personally hold is that I read the Hunger Games before anyone was talking about them. Like release date, I bought the Hunger Game book, the first one. So, and I hated it. Surprise, surprise. Yeah. Okay. So I was curious in this section. Jacob is talking about Sam looking at him and like how he knew that Sam wanted to like recruit him for his like cult gang thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so my thought was I was like, is Jacob the alpha? Like, because they're talking about Billy being like the unofficial leader, and his grandpa is Ephraim, who we know negotiated with Carlisle initially. So I was like, oh, is Sam like waiting for like the leader of the pack to come in? Like that would be so interesting. And then I have like a bunch of comments in the section wondering about how much like cliche werewolf dynamics and like werewolf pack dynamics come in, which is a next question I have. How many like paranormal werewolf romance books have you read, Amy?
None.
Great. Yeah. Okay.
I really haven't read a lot of like, I
paranormal romance fantasy
Yeah,
books. Yeah.
I haven't really read a lot of fantasy romance until recently, and it hasn't been a lot. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, because it's only been really prominent in one other series I have read, which this is not a spoiler because it happens right away in chapter 1, but in Crescent City.
Okay.
It is
I'm glad you prefaced that. Otherwise, I would have been like, "What are you doing?" But
I know you would have been mad. That's why Amy has not read. She's not up on all the SJM books. She's just read ACOTAR. I've read it.
Glass, and then we started doing this podcast, and I haven't had any time to read anything. So
that makes sense. That makes sense. So that they talk a lot about pack dynamics in that series, and like the wolf pack is like a very prominent main characters are part of the like a wolf pack, and the main character is like really in tight with them, even though she is not a werewolf. So I feel like that's like a lot of my like basis that I'm like bringing in. And then I have not read this book, but my whole book club has talked a lot about Bride by Allie Hazelwood, I believe. It was a huge werewolf vampire romance book that came out this year. It was really big on TikTok. And that's between a vampire and a werewolf. Okay. So anyways, yeah.
I was going to say, you talking about the pack dynamics, I do know that it comes up somewhat in Twilight because I have a vivid memory of this scene in the movie because I thought it was so stupid. Because it's like, I think it's the only time that you see them in werewolf form where they're talking to one another, and how they could have done it any better, but it's so cheesy because it's just like their voice, but they're showing wolves, and I'm like, oh my god, this is bad. Like, it does happen, but
oh man, that's a freaking good point. That when the animation is not good enough, it just comes out so cheesy.
And it's not even that the animation wasn't good. Like, I've never been one who's been too critical about CGI and stuff. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people who think it's really, really bad. That never really bothered me. It was just the fact that they have their regular voice, because they aren't like moving their mouths or anything as the words come out. It's just like a telepathic kind of thing. I'm like, this is so stupid. Like,
yeah.
But
it makes me think I'm really nervous about the Fourth Wing adaptation that's going to happen, but that's another whole series. Anyways, again, Amy hasn't read yet, so we can't talk about it here, guys, but DM me personally. Okay. So I was curious about that.
Yeah. I did have a note here specifically. You kind of already like talked about it at the beginning about being annoyed with Bella leading Jacob on, but there was like a specific thing that I was like really annoyed that was talking about what I don't even know what it was. Something about like it just was clearly
like hugs him or something.
Yeah. Oh, it's something that she says about that they'll have to start being responsible, and she says we'll have to start being responsible, and she makes a gesture indicating the two of them as a single entity, and then it says he liked that, he beamed, and I just like was annoyed because I'm like, obviously Bella's going through some shit and Jacob is helping her with that, but she's just completely leading him on, and like it's so obvious what his feelings are, and I'm like,
no, she's straight up using him.
Yeah.
It's pretty overt, which again, I'm like, that's where I want it to be this lore that the werewolves actually have a power to like counteract some effect that Edward has had on her or like numb something, because then at least it's like she's not just the worst, like it's something like else, which it's still powerful. Like I don't want to minimize the fact, like I think it still makes sense that she would make these choices because she's in a ton of pain. Here's the first person she feels like she can connect with. And not to say it's not valid and like I don't get it. The idea of like you're in a breakup, you've been in such a depression, the first person that's making you feel okay again, you want to spend a lot of time with them. You are afraid to lose them. Like I get that. I empathize with that. But it also sucks. Like it sucks to Jacob, like it doesn't make it okay, even though it makes sense,
Yeah. I do have a thing that I'm curious. I'm sure you do remember it, but I don't want to say it if you don't. But like the werewolves and like romantic partners, do you remember much about that?
Yes.
Okay, you do. Okay.
Mhm.
Because I was gonna say, like, I think that like could be the case because, obviously they're more like destined to have romantic partners versus vampires. It's like you have to turn them into a vampire in order for that to be realistic, kind of. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And the whole like werewolves being warm and vampires being cold, like I feel like it's alluding to like, oh, Bella should be with
Yeah.
Jacob, but
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll talk about that when we get there, because man, oh boy, do I have thoughts on that situation. But yeah. Um, okay, here's my other question because I genuinely cannot remember. Does Bella know about the werewolves?
no, no.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
thought that was interesting that Jake was talking about how werewolves were probably mentioned in the previous book because I'm like, were they? I mean, they were, but they weren't. It was saying that their people were, it's legend that they evolved from wolves, but the word werewolf was never used for
No.
sure. So,
No.
because
I don't
Jacob
think
doesn't even know he's a werewolf. So,
no. I don't think in Twilight it talks about werewolves at all. I
yeah.
think we only get the perspective in Midnight Sun, you know,
Well,
which obviously did
yeah,
not
the
come out.
only thing that Jacob says is that their ancestors were legend to be descended from wolves. That's
Right.
the
Right.
only kind of hint. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, because I was like, wait, does she know though? Like, why is he being all secretive? But yeah, no. Okay. That seems weird to me, honestly. But
Well, he doesn't even know.
no, it seems weird to me that Edward wouldn't have said
Oh,
anything.
sure, sure. Well,
Like when talking about La Push and like all this stuff, like he talks about like the dynamics and how the tribe doesn't like them. It feels weird that he wouldn't have said because they're werewolves and we are natural enemies or something, you
yeah.
know?
I mean, maybe just because it isn't relevant anymore because he knows there aren't werewolves, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he
Yeah,
does.
it
He
is
knows
weird
there
that
are
he knows.
werewolves.
I
Yeah,
mean, he doesn't tell her a lot of stuff that's happening.
that-
So,
that's
but
true. Yeah. Okay, that's the end of my notes for 7. I don't know if you want to share anything else or jump into 8.
um, let's see. I'm just looking through my notes to see what is relevant or not. Oh, here's where they talk about the cliff diving and they talk about it being 100 feet. And I was like, damn, that's really, really tall. And I had to look up because I'm like, I went cliff jumping when I was in high school and I
Mhm.
looked up to see how tall it was because I couldn't remember and I knew it wasn't anywhere near 100 feet. But they had different size cliffs and I did like the smaller one. I was too scared to do the big one. The big one was like 60. The one I went off was 40. And I was like, that was high enough. Like,
Oh my gosh,
yeah, I'm like, 100's crazy. Like,
that's crazy. Yeah.
especially in the ocean. Like, I was going
Mhm.
into a man-made
Nope.
lake. So,
Yeah.
yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Nope. That's scary. That's scary. Cliff diving anywhere like on a rocky coast freaks me out so bad.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah. All right, we had a little technical issues there, so we're jumping back into it. I don't know if I had many other notes for it. Oh, I did. I have notes for this chapter about Sam and the timing about
Mm.
how he was supposed to go to college but ended up staying and no one gave him crap about it. I'm like that timeline um lines up with when the Cullens came to town. So I wonder if it was intentional that they knew he was going to be a werewolf or not, you know?
Oh, you think it's when Cullens came to town?
It says he's 20 now, so when he was 18, the Cullens came 2 years ago, about. So,
Huh. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
yeah. So I have questions about that we probably will never get answers to. But
Yeah.
and I
What a
have questions about this whole thing about, and I'll have more questions about it, I think at the very end, the last chapter we read about like if they pick who becomes werewolves or how that works, and like
yeah.
Sam's looking at Jacob like he's next, so there must be some kind of thing that they know. But then Billy says something to Jacob about, I don't know, I have it highlighted somewhere about like, oh, well, you'll know, and if you don't, we'll talk about it at some point, kind of thing. So I'm like curious
Yeah.
about it. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's not clear. And I thought it was specifically because I thought the Cullens were here for longer than 2 years, but I can be misremembering that.
I guess at this point now, I think it's been longer because we're like a year later. So I think it's been like 3 years at this point. But well,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Because my theory was that it was when vampires were feeding on people in the area is what triggered it. So I was thinking more like when like James and Laurent come, or like maybe like Jasper's family from before. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Either
Oh, don't know if we'll ever get answers, but
Yep. And
yeah.
lots of thoughts around that actually, because then Jacob says later it stopped. Like more werewolves aren't being made when he's like mad and fighting with Bella. And in theory, then we would think because the Cullens left, but they come back. So then are there more? Whatever. We'll find out later, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, but it's actually in this section right here that Billy says something to Jacob. He says, because Jacob's asking about, or no, he's telling Bella about a conversation that he had with Billy about him being concerned about Sam and how Billy's not concerned. And he says, it's nothing you need to worry about now, Jacob. In a few years, if you don't, well, I'll explain later. So that kind of is giving me the impression that he thinks he'll probably become a werewolf, but he doesn't know for sure. So maybe it is about like if there's vampires in the area or something, and since the Cullens are gone, maybe it won't happen. So
Yeah. It's clearly just younger people. Whatever. I want the werewolf lore book.
I know. I want a lot more lore. But we're getting more lore than I remembered there being, at least.
Yeah. True. You want to jump into 8?
Yeah, I think I'm ready to jump into 8.
Great.
See what happens in 8. They're riding the bikes. That's what happens in 8.
Yep. Okay, I think we've got Edward's voice coming back again. She makes the connection. It's when dangerous things are happening. I swear Edward is actually talking to her. I think he is. I don't know how, whatever, but that's what I'm believing right now. And okay, I also have to talk about, she crashes the bike, right? And then there's a line that says she hears multiple growls. So in my mind, I'm thinking she says the growl of one of them being like the motorcycle. But then I am like, and like a vamp, like Edward nearby and the werewolves. I don't know. But she, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I had to pull that up because I didn't really catch that. Yeah, the line says, it sounded like there were 3 things snarling: the bike over me, the voice in my head, and something else.
Yeah. Which I thought then was werewolves, maybe because Edward is nearby.
Yeah.
Growling at Edward.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know if that lines up with the story, but that's what I'm believing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even catch that. I wonder if it's like Jacob and the whole werewolf thing is my only thought, but I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah. No idea. My theory being it's Edward. Not Edward growling, but like Edward and then the werewolves are growling at him. But also I don't think he's here. I don't know.
Yeah.
This doesn't track for me.
Yeah. This is also where Bella apologizes for bleeding. And Jacob's like, well, she says, I'm sorry, Jacob. And he's like, why are you apologizing for bleeding? Like,
yeah, that was I have a note about that also.
I also, when I was watching the movie part of this, like every time I watch the movies, I so distinctly remember the times during the premieres that everyone was cheering in the audience. And this was one of those moments when Jacob took off his shirt. Like,
yes. Oh my gosh. When you said that, I'm like, I do remember that. That's so funny.
No, every time I watch the movies, I think about, like, I remember all the times because I went to every single one of the premieres. Maybe not the first Twilight. No, I think I went to that premiere too, even though I hadn't read the books. But yeah, like every time I watch the movies, I remember every single moment that people cheer. And also, did you know it's a thing at some movie theaters, like that they have Twilight marathons? I just saw this on TikTok the other day. Yeah, where they do like a marathon where all day you watch all the Twilight movies. I'm like, me and Callie need to go to this.
We have to go.
Apparently, nobody cheers for Jacob because they know what the ending is. Because there was like one specific moment that they cheered for him that I saw a video, but I just thought that was funny. So,
we got to look up if it's happening in Denver anytime that you're here in Minneapolis when I'm there.
Yeah.
I only have one more note for this chapter. Oh, but we've already talked about it. So never mind. Apparently that's all my notes. My last one is talking about me thinking about the link between Bella and Jacob and thinking that Jacob is maybe soothing something from the vampires. Yeah, so I guess I don't have a lot of notes for this chapter. So share what else you would like to, Amy.
I don't have anything else of significance. I have a lot of notes, but I go through and like pick out my notes that I think are like, oh, I'll talk about that versus the ones I don't feel the need to. I did find it funny that Jacob called the werewolves that he clearly is not aware are werewolves yet a super bear. So maybe it's a super bear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing that happens in this chapter. They decide, because Bella keeps getting injured on the motorcycles, they decide that they're going to go and try and find the meadow. Obviously, Jacob does not know the significance of the meadow, but
yeah.
So
yeah, and this is because Bella's trying to figure out when she hears Edward's voice. Mm-hmm. So has not made the connection. It's when she's in danger yet, although she does.
Which I find interesting because this chapter is called Adrenaline.
Yeah, it feels like pretty obvious in this section, but whatever. Okay, number 9 then, chapter 9.
Yeah, third wheel.
Yeah, third wheel, and don't we hate some unrequited love, which is this section. This section. Yeah. I have pretty minimal notes for this chapter as well. The main one being things we have talked about, which is that I'm really happy Bella in this chapter like has a heart-to-heart with Jacob and is like, no, for real, it's not happening. And so this is the switch where I go from being annoyed with Bella to like annoyed with Jacob, because again, I personally view that the responsibility, once it's been overtly communicated, it passes to the other person. So, but Jacob is so sweet. Like, again, I have a comment just being like, I get why people are so into him. Like, even in this, when he's being kind of dumb, I'm still like, he's so like sweet about it. Like, he's such a nice guy, you know?
Which is funny because one of the lines that I have highlighted, I feel like is not the nicest line, but it's funny, but it's not overtly mean either. But it's Jacob saying, and I'm glad that it made it into the movie, which is why I made a note of it, about him saying, you should hold up for someone with a stronger stomach, someone who laughs at the door that makes weaker men vomit. I'm like, that's such a... But
again, it was another, I did roll my eyes at that line in both the movie and the book, because I just am like, again, like, yeah, classic. This came out in 2006. It's annoying. Any of those like gender has to look like this is
And it's
Duh.
very teenage boy also.
Yeah,
Like,
it is. It's very teenage boy. Very
yeah,
teenage boy.
yeah. But yeah, I had a note here about where I was annoyed with Jacob, and I'm like, I think this is like the one moment that I get really annoyed with Jacob. There's probably future moments in this series now that I think about it, but it's the first time I get annoyed with him where he Bella explains like that she's not into him in that way, and he like says something, oh, that's okay, as long as you like me the best and you think I'm good looking, I'm prepared to be annoyingly persistent. And I'm like, that's annoying. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just take a hint. Not even a hint. She was very clear at that point, but
Yeah. Yeah.
because I
It's
could understand if he was like frustrated about how she was leading him on because she had been, but like
true.
instead he's like, oh yeah, I know, but I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm like, whatever. But she made
Yeah.
it clear. So
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then the chapter ends with us. What we know is Jacob's it sounds weird to say Jacob transitioning, but Jacob turning into a werewolf.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you don't remember if you knew the first time about them being werewolves or not, right? Yeah. Because
No.
I'm just like I've made notes throughout this like that I feel like this would be so much more interesting about what's going on if you didn't have that context because it's so obvious when you do have the context. I feel
Yeah.
like it at some point becomes very obvious without having the context, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious like where people pick up on that or not, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Perhaps in chapter 10.
What a segue.
Okay, so Jacob is sick, won't see Bella anymore. So Bella's kind of one coping strategy, aka hang out with Jacob, is suddenly gone, and she is back to spiraling and decides she's going to the meadow by herself.
Mm.
And it is sad. It's sad. And then it's scary because who shows up? A vampire named Laurent.
Yeah. I honestly kind of forgot about this scene from the movie because it is in the movie, but I was like, who is at the Met? I'm like, Edward is not there or not. And I was also especially thrown off because it talks about someone being very pale, and in the movies, Laurent is black. And I'm like, who is
Yeah,
this person?
yeah,
I
yeah.
thought it was one of the Cullens, and I'm like, this was not in the movies, but no, it's Laurent.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah. Spooky. Spooky. Also, yeah, this is also the first time in the books that we're getting some acknowledgement about Victoria, which
Mhm.
is insane.
Mhm.
Insane. We've just kind of glossed over that. Hasn't really been a thing.
Yeah, they
Uh,
haven't really talked about it at all since James died. Like,
yeah,
that's how long. It's not just even this book. Like,
no.
even at the end of the last book, like,
Mhm.
it's crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Uh, yeah, it's nonsense. And one of the few things that I'm like, the movie plot did it better, that they acknowledged it. Like,
yeah.
yeah. Anyways, yeah. And let's just talk about how idiotic and unrealistic it is. Like, I just don't buy that Edward didn't think Victoria was gonna come and hunt
I
them down.
know. I
That
don't
makes
get that.
zero sense. He's been so hyper paranoid about her safety from other vampires this whole time, but he doesn't think like Victoria's gonna come.
But I mean, maybe he assumed that she would come for them rather than Bella. Like, Laurent makes it pretty clear that she's looking to get revenge by killing Bella since Edward killed her mate, but like maybe he didn't put that together, and for some reason Alice isn't having visions, which that is what I'm more curious about. Why isn't Alice having any of these visions? Or maybe
Yeah,
she is having some, like, but wouldn't she? I guess if she saw Laurent being there, she might also see the werewolves coming and protecting Bella. But yeah, there's some questions there.
yeah, Yeah. I just think because I'm like, James was obsessed. He wasn't trying to kill Edward. He was trying to kill Bella.
Yeah.
And I mean, my best guess is that they just didn't make the connection that Victoria was James's mate. And he just thought she was so freaked out and wanted to run away every time he was reading her mind that he just like literally didn't think this was going to be a thing.
I think it was said explicitly in Midnight Sun about them being mates, but I could be wrong.
Really? Okay. Either way, I think that's not realistic to Edward as a character. I think it's a major plot hole.
Yeah, I agree.
In the book.
I know. I really wish we had Edward's perspective on this book because I'm like, what are they all doing right now? Like, yeah, I want more context that we won't get. But
no. And where I'm like, we made a lot of jokes last season about Midnight Sun being written to fill in all the plot holes that people complained about with Twilight. And I'm like, I don't even care. Please write a book that explains all the plot holes. Yeah, I'll read it. Like, yeah. Anyways, so whatever is what it is. Yeah, I will say it was a little intense. And I was remembering, I thought Edward was going to like come, because I think maybe that's like part of the mystery in this book is like, why is she hearing the voices? And you are kind of led to think that Edward is maybe close by. Like, I remember specifically in this scene thinking Edward was going to like jump out when did
you think that Laurent was Edward at first because they didn't say what his name was? Did you have any, or not really?
No, I didn't think it was Edward in the meadow. I don't remember if I did the first time, but I definitely didn't like this time. Yeah, but I did think when Laurent started freaking out, I remember definitively the first time thinking it was Edward. Yeah. And even this time I was like, wait, is it Edward? And then as soon as the werewolves came out, I was like, oh, right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also found it interesting. I mentioned this. I had this thought earlier in the chapter before they went to the meadows, but Bella said something about how she's like suspicious of Jacob, and I'm like, that's interesting that she's suspicious of him, but was not suspicious at all about the vampires. And then she's like very fearful of the werewolves, which also not very fearful of the vampires. But I did have the thought that the vampires she sees more as human versus the werewolves. She has no idea that they're connected to humans in any kind of way. Like, she just thinks they're giant wolves. So I guess that does check out. But
this is an exception to the man versus bear in the woods scenario. Bella would choose not only the man, but the vampire over the wolves. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that Bella surprises herself by wishing she was a vampire in this section because she wants to be like powerful,
Yeah, I think it's in the next chapter, but yeah.
Oh, is it? Sorry, everyone.
Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. In which case, I'm out of notes for this chapter.
I did have one more note about this that I was curious about because obviously Laurent is very fearful of the werewolves. And I'm like, how common are werewolves? Like, do they see werewolves in other places or not? Or is it just this one specific tribe that has the werewolves? Like, I don't know. I was curious about that because obviously we see there's different covens of vampires, but don't know how many packs of werewolves there are in the world. So...
yeah, that actually brings up an interesting point because if the werewolves are back because there's vampires like stationary, that would lead me to believe that there's also werewolves in Denali, which again, if we're going with the whole same plot, Alaska also has a lot of like indigenous tribes, so that would like make sense there. But the only other vampires we know that are kind of stationary in the same place are in Italy, which does not make sense for a bunch of werewolves to be running around.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Again, I want the werewolf lore.
I know. Hopefully that's one of the books that's coming out. But
yeah.
Who knows?
It also would seem dumb if the werewolves are only in the 2 places that the vampires are actually being safe to the humans, but who knows?
I didn't quite follow your train of thought there. So you thought that there would be werewolves in Denali?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Because there's vampires who live there permanently? Is that the thought?
Yes.
My only thought is like the tribe that Jacob's in, like they didn't come because there was werewolves. Although I guess, yeah, never mind. I'm following your track now, and that does make sense. And I wasn't thinking of it in the right way.
Yeah,
Okay.
like
Yep.
Yeah. I'm thinking, to clarify in case it's not making sense for other people, if we're thinking like, you know, potentially like this is something unlocked in this tribe's like genes that then they can become werewolves. It is seemingly possible that could happen in Alaska. They're not that far removed. And yeah, there's also, we know of one other permanent vampire family group, which is in Alaska. So that was my train of thought.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Maybe that'll be what the other book is about. It's about the werewolves in Denali.
Hey, I'd take it. Okay. 11, last chapter.
Yeah, I started off making a note right away that I get that Jacob's obviously going through some shit, but it does bother me that he clearly knows that Bella went through like a near-death experience with Laurent in the meadow and is still ignoring her. Like, you know?
You're right. I didn't even put that together. Like,
yeah. That was my first note, literally the first line of the chapter. I'm like, why isn't Jacob doing anything? Like, yeah. So
yeah, that's
bitter
weird.
about the fact that she was into a vampire, I guess. So I don't know. But
Yeah, and maybe my only thing here, I mean, he still should have like reached out, but like my only thought being like maybe he doesn't want to like lead on that he knows that, or like he doesn't want her to know he's a werewolf at this point because he has not revealed that yet, even though she knows there's giant wolves. So Bella does not know there's werewolves yet.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh, here, my next note is about her saying that she wanted to be a vampire. It definitely does jump ahead a bit, but it's specifically in regards to when she goes and sees Jacob, right? Or maybe she hasn't seen him at this point, but she's aware that like Sam like has like initiated him into the gang.
Oh, yeah.
So she's like really pissed off at Sam and wishes she was a vampire so she could hurt him. Like, even though she's like, I know I shouldn't hurt him, but like,
yeah, like she wants to be like intimidating and scary.
Yeah, which I did have a note here. Like, I'm like, even though I obviously don't want Bella like killing anybody like Sam, but I think it's good that her desire to be a vampire isn't just to be with Edward. Like, I feel like that's good. I mean, it's not good that she just wants to like kill this guy, but
no. And again, maybe because of the tropes I like to read, but like I don't love the power dynamic between Bella and basically everyone she's into, but particularly Edward is so like, it's just annoying to me, you know, even though I've been like into it, it is also like such an obvious like power dynamic. And I don't love like main character is weak female who is helpless and needs a protector. Like I'm just not into those like kind of stories. And so I am like glad this is kind of the first indicator we have that Bella like wants to be strong on her own, not just that she wants to be with Edward. And I think that's like, like really powerful. Or basically every other time she's looking for like invincibility, it's to not be viewed as fragile, but not because she cares about being fragile, but she cares that Edward isolates her when she is perceived by him to be fragile, you know?
Yeah.
So again, it's motivated by Edward, and this is the first time she wants that for herself, which I think is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I have very few memories of Bella once she turns and like her being more of like a strong character. So I honestly think my favorite books are going to be Eclipse and Breaking Dawn.
I don't
Because I'm excited
remember
for that.
when she turns, but I honestly don't
I don't
think
either.
I think it might not be till Breaking Dawn. Like,
Okay.
I don't think we see like a ton of her as a vampire. Spoilers. I'm sure everybody knows that by now. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I either was like, it's either the very end of Eclipse or the beginning of Breaking Dawn, but it makes sense
Yeah.
for it to.
Yeah. I won't say anything. Never mind. I think I remember when.
Yeah. I just am trying to remember the major plot points through the series. And since I have nothing for Eclipse, I'm like, is this one of the plot points here?
Yeah.
Or do I remember literally zero? Anyways, doesn't matter.
Eclipse and Breaking Dawn are like blurred together for me a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get there in a couple weeks. So, okay. My next comment is when Jacob and her are talking. Do you have anything you want to add before then?
No, my next comment is also during that. So,
okay. I personally am so annoyed about this twist for Jacob because it is exactly Edward. It's what's annoying about Edward. It is like Jacob has gone from genuine friend, like this warm person, to like cold, aloof. And the other thing that I think is so big in here is I think he hints, my perception reading it at least, was that like he's bad now. He doesn't deserve to have Bella as a friend. Like he is again, it's another powerful character. Like Jacob is not like, I'm a protector now of these people. I'm going to protect you, Bella. Like he is like, something is wrong with me and it's the Cullens' fault and I'm like bad now. Like almost like this idea of like soullessness again. Although at this point, we don't have any belief that werewolves are immortal or soulless. So that doesn't even check. But like, yeah, that's so annoying. That's not an interesting arc. We already have that character. Like,
yeah.
I'm over it.
I'm trying to find the exact thing, but I guess I didn't highlight it, so I can't find it. But he like outright says that he is bad and not good for her kind of thing, which I was surprised because I didn't remember that. Like, I feel like that ends up changing, and I did have some insight as to why that is, but I don't think I'll say anything because it gives away something else that I have a feeling you probably don't remember. So,
perhaps not.
But I think we'll learn it like next week, honestly. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my thought was like that part of the reason that he's so like thinking he's bad or whatever is like, if I remember correctly, I think it's like difficult when they first change into werewolves to like control like their anger and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think like he is like genuinely like having a harder time than he does later on, because I don't remember this being a thing like later on.
No, I do think it's around the transition, which I think makes sense, but I just think like, I don't know. I think it would have been more compelling to then have him be mad he's not with Bella, or like mad about some other situation, and then like all of a sudden be totally out of proportion with his anger. And that's the twist in his personality. For him suddenly just to be like cold and like, I'm bad and you're good, and so like we can't spend time together. I'm like, we already have a character that does that.
Yeah, I also think it's weird because, like, I feel like it's pretty clear, although he doesn't say anything about it, that he's probably pretty pissed that she's knowingly had dated a vampire, you know? Like, I have a feeling he's probably pissed about it, and now it's confirmed for him that he knows that they're vampires. So I'm surprised that doesn't come up here. Like,
yeah. Right. Again, that would be interesting. Like, for him to, like, have uncontrollable rage, but then be like, lose it and suddenly go off and admit that he knows Edward's actually a vampire and it's Edward's fault. Like he says that it's the Cullens' fault, whatever's going on, but like again, I don't know. I just don't think that's interesting. I don't think it's an interesting character choice.
Yeah. Okay, I'm curious how much you remember, because Jake talked about this a bit about like what causes them to change into werewolves and how it's clearly not like the moon cycle or whatever. Do you remember much about that or not? Okay. I won't say anything.
Nada. Okay.
I think we'll learn more about it next week too. But
okay. My final note is about the cliffhanger at the end. I don't know if you have anything you want to say before then, but
I do have some stuff before that, but I definitely have notes on that also. But I did have a note here that Bella talks about that the Cullens left more than half a year ago already. And I'm like, this timeline is crazy. Like, they have been away longer now than Bella knew them. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But let's see. I think I had another. Oh, yeah, then I had some notes here about let's see, what was the context of this? Bella is like blaming Sam for like what's going on, and Jacob says that Sam isn't doing anything and that he knows that the Cullens are gone and the vampires are gone, and he says, but sometimes things are set in motion and then it's too late. So clearly that's somehow referring to them turning into werewolves, which once again, I'm curious about the lore, and I just highlighted it because I'm like, that alludes to something. I don't know exactly what, but and then also it talks about how Bella talked to Quill earlier and about how Quill is freaked out going to be next, and Jacob clearly is concerned here and is like, he's not going to be next, like he can't be, it's over now, this shouldn't be happening, why? And it's like, yeah, that just alludes to more like, what is it that causes more people to turn or not, and like when does it stop, and is it when the threat's over, or you know, like I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about that too. And if like, because, but also I'm like, vampires are still here. You just saw Laurent.
I know, yeah, but maybe they like scared him out and he didn't like kill anybody while he was here or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But also it says they found, like Charlie says they found 2 people and blood. Okay, but also
I think that happens after this moment, but
after, okay. Anyways, yeah. My I do actually have one more note, which is before the window scratching, which is about Charlie standing up for Bella and calling Billy and kind of like, in some ways, kind of ending his friendship, at least putting a rift in his friendship with Billy in Bella's defense, which is a good dad moment for Charlie. Like Charlie's really trying, he's really trying to be a good dad.
Yeah, I know. I had a note about that too. That was just that I love Charlie in that moment because he's like, don't put this on Bella. Like, she was clear about things. Like,
yeah.
But it definitely, I think, puts a dent in his and Billy's friendship. But
yeah. And then the cliffhanger,
which I don't remember who or what this is. I have some theories, but I don't remember for sure.
I don't remember either.
What are your theories?
Well, my theory is that it's Victoria, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
You think it's definitely someone bad? Or
no, because I thought it was someone bad reading it, but now I'm like, I feel like Stephenie Meyer's has cliffhangers where you think it's really bad and then it's nothing. So maybe it's like a tree branch and she's just a mean author.
No, because like I genuinely don't remember who it is, but I think it's someone good, but I really don't know. It definitely could be. I was very tempted to keep reading, but I did not.
Yeah. I like cut myself off.
I glanced at the next page and it didn't say anything there. I'm like, no, I'm not flipping another page. So
yeah.
but Yeah, what a cliffhanger. That was
Oh,
so.
what a cliffhanger.
Yeah. I did have a question just since you were talking about Victoria. Have you been like, and I know with the last book, it was always like, oh, when is something bad's gonna happen? When is it gonna happen? Have you been like worried about Victoria coming back or not so much?
No, not in this book.
I guess we kind
Yeah.
of talked about that. We didn't think she came back till later. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess right now that's the only thing I think happens in Eclipse. But
Yeah.
maybe she's in Italy. I don't know. I have
Yeah.
no idea where she went. I've got
Yeah.
no thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, now suddenly I'm like, wait, is she with the Volturi? Is she like talking to them? I don't remember.
No.
I am trying to picture it, but all I can picture is Dakota Fanning in her cloak.
Yep. Yep.
Which we don't actually see Dakota Fanning until Breaking Dawn, do we? Like obviously the Volturi are in the movies before then.
Yeah, I don't think she's not in this one for
Yeah.
sure. But I don't know if she's in Eclipse or not. I'm not
All
sure.
right. We'll find out.
Hmm.
We will find out.
Yeah.
Ugh, man. Yeah, it's a cliffhanger. Woo!
Hmm? I know. I have some theories, but I won't share the theories.
Yeah.
They would spoil some things that I do remember. So
Okay. We should put a poll on Instagram and see if people kept reading or if they actually stopped. Because if I wasn't doing this podcast, I would have kept reading.
oh, absolutely. For sure. Yeah.
I only did for the podcast is the only reason. But if I was just like following along, I would have just kept going.
Yeah. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a time. Yeah.
Well, next week, I don't think we even said what chapters we read this week, but it was 6 through 11 this week. Next week, we are reading chapters 12 through 18. So,
yeah. And that's our second to last one.
crazy. So
Crazy.
much faster when you're not reading two books at once.
Yeah, for real. So much faster. So, yeah, that'll be that. And then it'll be Eclipse after New Moon. So if you are putting the books on hold on Libby, put Eclipse on hold now.
Yeah. You can always delay it if you need to. That's what I'm currently doing. I have like 5 books that are ready for me. I'm like, I don't have time for this. So we're just going to keep putting them on hold.
Yeah. So I did deliver later for one book, but then I had enough that were available. And so then I checked them all out, took my Kindle off. And because the book I'm currently reading has left my library, but it's on my Kindle because my Kindle is in airplane mode. But then I renewed it and got it back. Yeah. So then, so I took my Kindle off airplane mode, re-downloaded like 5 new books today.
Yeah.
And then put it back in airplane mode, like, and then, downloaded them, then put them in airplane mode. So now I'm like set for a chunk of time.
I have done that in the past before, but I have not done it since we started this podcast because I do the reading on my laptop a lot of the time, so I can take notes with my keyboard is faster. So then I to be able, because when you access it there, then it would delete them. So
yeah, that makes
delaying
sense.
them all once a week. I have them all so that they're all the same date, so I'm not having to go in the app all the time. So on Mondays, I go and delay it.
Yeah, I take notes on my phone. Although I'm thinking about maybe switching to like a voice to text to see if that will help me get through. But for whatever reason, I know the number of pages we're reading is similar, but I'm reading New Moon way faster.
Me too. I think it has to do with like the not having to jump back and forth because it's taken me a lot less time to get through our reading than it did before.
Like maybe half as much time, which I'm like, is my ADHD that bad that I'm getting that distracted switching between the two?
Yeah.
Like that does not seem right to me, but maybe. I don't know.
I also wonder, it's possible that I like messed up with, I don't know which one of them, but one of them because I know that the number of pages can change based on like your text size. So maybe I messed with
Yeah.
that. Oh, and we were reading more with the previous one. I don't know. So
Yeah, maybe. But I'm reading, yeah, because normally you guys know I'm a procrastinating queen, so I read before we record every day. And we normally record at 3 p.m. and I set my alarm early. Like I wake up early to start reading and then normally make coffee and read all the way until like basically I watch the movie chunk and then hop on
yeah.
the like podcast basically every time. And normally I'm watching the movie while I'm doing my makeup and getting dressed because I'm in pajamas still.
That would be me too if I didn't have to work during the day. I typically read it on the day before we record. So, because I have to, because I don't have time the day of. But
Yeah, yeah. Amy works the normal like 9 to 5. Although she like can flex, which is how we record at 3. But yeah, and I do not work normal. I normally have like a decent amount of weekdays off and work a lot of weekends. And
pretty often
evenings.
my Sundays are spent reading.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyways, but like last week and this week, like last week, I set my alarm early to do my normal read all day, and I finished at like noon and then was like, I've got hours until we record. And
Yeah.
same this week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, what a time. What a time. Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for joining in for week 2 of New Moon. We will see you next week for week 3 of season 2. Yeah, halfway through. We're cruising. We're cruising, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, see you next week.